Welcome to Journaling with Nature, the podcast for those who want to turn curiosity into wonder, a pencil sketch into a rabbit hole of discovery, a moment of stillness into a life full of joy. I'm your host, Bethan Burton. Let's open the pages of our nature journals and explore this world together. Hello, this is episode 162. I want to share an exciting milestone that the podcast reached this week, and that is that we've just passed 200,000 downloads. It's incredible to me to think that 200,000 times someone somewhere decided to spend their time listening to this podcast. It just makes me so happy. And I want to say a huge thank you to you for being part of this number, for being here, for listening, for being an important part of this network of people who love nature and creativity and community and connection. I started the podcast 4 years ago, back in August 2020, and there's no way that I could have done this so long without the financial support of all of the listeners on Patreon. This support has meant that I can keep going with the project and cover my expenses for recording and hosting the episodes. A huge, huge thank you to all the Patreon supporters. Through these 4 years, I've been so lucky to have this platform and the opportunity to speak with people from all around the world about their lives, their connection with nature, their deepest thoughts and feelings about what it is to be human, to be creative on this planet, and to relate to the natural world. I've made some incredible friendships which started with these interviews and then blossomed into much more than that. I've had the chance to speak with some of my creative heroes, and I found new heroes in the process of interviewing. I can't begin to tell you how lucky I feel to be here and to be doing this. And it hasn't always been easy. I'm doing this podcast around all the other parts of my life, primarily being with my son. And I sometimes thought that it was too hard, like I might stop one day and I wouldn't be able to keep going with the podcast because each episode takes so much investment in time and energy. But I always come back to the feeling that I'm so blessed to have these conversations and that they nourish me in a really profound way. Making connections on a heart level, coming to understand the world through someone else's eyes, and learning from my guests and connecting with listeners. It's something I definitely don't want to live without, so I keep going. And I'm not always organized. On average, I would say, and this is really embarrassing, that I reschedule interviews at least twice before I finally get a chance to talk with my guest. Because I have to juggle childcare, so I plan an interview, I have to rope in a family member to babysit while I'm doing it, and that creates a lot of moving parts and possibilities for things to change. Anyway, all that to say that it isn't always easy, but it's always deeply fulfilling and something that I'm committed to continuing. I've been asked in the past whether I think I might run out of people to interview, and the answer is most definitely no. Everyone has a story, no matter if they have a big platform or no platform at all, whether they have been nature journaling for years or if they've just started. Each story is important and I love listening to them. So thank you for being here and for being part of this big 200,000 download milestone. Today, it's another prompt episode, so let's jump into it. Last time I interviewed Mary Jo Hoffman, who I found utterly inspiring in every way, and part of our chat involved talking about her project of identifying 72 microseasons of her region. The idea of the 72 microseasons is a Japanese concept of dividing the traditional calendar into 72 microseasons, each lasting 5 days and marked by changes that you can see in nature. And Mary Jo spent so much time noticing her natural environment that when she came across this idea, she went about noting down what could be the 72 microseasons of her region in Minnesota. I was really taken by this idea because I'm fascinated by seasonality and the seasons in my area, which are quite subtle because I live in the subtropics and in an evergreen landscape. But there are changes, and sometimes these changes come quickly and they're quickly replaced by something else. For example, just recently we've had what I call wattle season, where a lot of local acacia trees burst into flower all at once, and then the season's over. I think it lasts more than 5 days, but it's quite short. And so this 72 microseason idea is really interesting. I've been attempting for a long time, really quite unsuccessfully, to keep a perpetual nature journal. A perpetual nature journal is a type of journal developed by Lara Cole-Gastinger, who has been a guest on this podcast. And the idea is that you divide your nature journal into sections that represent weeks of the year. And so you'll have 52 pages or 52 spreads. And then you come back to that dated page again and again, adding something that you noticed for that week of the year over the years. So you return to the pages and add something more and more and more. I don't know why I haven't been properly committed to this style of journaling. I think it's a great idea. It's really accessible. Maybe it's because there is a week in between I sort of get out of the rhythm. Anyway, since I chatted with Mary Jo, I've started adding what might be considered micro-seasons into my perpetual journal. Because it's already divided up in 52 weeks, it kind of works. I've been noting down little changes that come and then go, subtle things that you might miss unless you are paying close attention. So I propose for today's prompt that we look at micro-seasons in our environment. And this is a long-term project, of course, but it could be a lovely way to get us to look for subtle changes, things that come and go quickly, but are important and lovely to notice. It might be the arrival of a certain migratory species, or it might be a species moving on, or something blooming, or the end of a blooming period. In Mary Jo's book and in the traditional Japanese calendar, the seasons are arranged like haiku poems. I'd love to read a few of them from Mary Jo's book just so you can get an idea of what this is all about. So I'm looking at Mary Jo's book right now, and in fact, the calendar is divided into 24 different times of the year, and then within those times, there's 3 different micro-seasons, and so it ends up being 72. Some of the times that I can see in the pages of Mary Jo's book are time of tall grasses, time of colour, time of harvest. Within the time of harvest, this is my favourite one. It says wild rice scatters in canoe bottoms, smell of wood smoke and fallen leaves, squirrels cache nuts. So each of these times is divided into its own little haiku poem, and I find it so beautiful. So I invite you to start noticing and noting in your nature journal the micro seasons around you, the little changes that happen in nature throughout the year within the bigger and more obvious seasonal shifts that we know so well. And if you search on the internet for the 72 micro seasons of the traditional Japanese calendar, you'll find a lot of information. And of course, you can go back to Mary Jo's book, which is called Still, and within that, you'll see the 72 micro-seasons that Mary Jo has identified for her own region. I would love to hear what you notice. You can leave a comment below this episode on the Journaling with Nature podcast and let me know. Thank you so much for listening. See you next week.